Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing that his country's army will enter the southern Gaza city of Rafah, regardless of whether a ceasefire deal is reached with Hamas. Speaking at a meeting with the families of Israeli hostages, Netanyahu said Israel would not end the war until all of its goals had been achieved, including eliminating Hamas battalions in Rafah. Many had hoped a ceasefire agreement would avert a Rafah ground incursion, which Israel's allies, including the United States and Germany, have warned against. Let's get more from DW's correspondent in Jerusalem, Tania Krämer. Tania, is Benjamin Netanyahu's stance on Rafah jeopardising the possibility of reaching any kind of deal?
Well, that's also being discussed in Israel between those who are supporting such a deal that is currently being worked on through mediators Qatar and Egypt in Cairo, and where a response by Hamas is actually waited for at the moment. And those, of course, who are opposing to end the war, and those who have said that Israel should not be guided by international pressure, and among them are also members of his own cabinet, some of the far-right members of his cabinet. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said it time and time again himself that he thinks that the military needs to go into Rafah to destroy Hamas, as he puts it, and also to achieve a full victory in this war, something that many Israelis are not actually believing in anymore at this point in time. And his critics have said he should not have said that now as a public statement. It is a crucial time while those mediators are trying to get such a deal together. And of course, it's also devastating for the families and relatives of those hostages that remain in Gaza. And of course, we should not forget, it just comes a couple of hours before U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to arrive in Israel, and his priority is also to push for such a deal.
As you say, Blinken will be in Israel, or is expected to visit Israel soon. Does the US have enough leverage to pressure Israel not to attack Rafah? What influence can he bring?
Well, I mean, his main goal is, as he had said, is to bring both sides first and foremost together to engage indirectly, obviously, and to come to a deal and to get to at least a temporary ceasefire. This is actually to prevent such an operation or ground operation in Rafah, and the US and other countries, you said it, have made it very clear that they oppose such a ground operation in Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians that have been displaced multiple times are seeking some sort of shelter. They said there needs to be at least a credible plan to bring those people to some sort of safety. There's also the question of aid, because most of the aid is still going in through the Rafah crossing. This is another very important point on Blinken's agenda, that more humanitarian aid needs to go into Gaza. It's still not enough, although Israeli officials saying that aid has been increased, but aid organizations say it's not enough. And also we will see him certainly talking more about on a regional level. He just came from Saudi Arabia to prevent any further escalation, also on a regional level.
DW's Jerusalem correspondent Tania Krämer. Tania, thank you. Many had hoped agreement on a ceasefire could avert a Rafah ground incursion, which Israel's allies, including the United States and Germany, have warned against. The United Nations Relief Agency for Palestinians, or UNRWA, warns that while more aid has been getting through, any Rafah military operation could severely disrupt vital distribution efforts.
The crossing at Rafah, a vital lifeline for Gazans that could soon be under threat. Famine is looming for more than 1 million people here. The UN estimates billions of dollars in aid are necessary in the coming months. Israel says aid is flowing.
Over the last few weeks, the amount of humanitarian aid going into Gaza has significantly increased. In the coming days, the amount of aid going into Gaza will continue to scale up even more. Food, water, medical supplies, shelter equipment, and other aid. More of it is going into Gaza than ever before.
So far, aid has entered Gaza via land and air, often using the Egyptian port of El Arish. Freight trucks then head for the Rafah crossing. Israel has announced it's temporarily opening other crossings at Erez and the so-called Gate 96, which allow aid into northern Gaza without a dangerous drive through the conflict zone. The US and other countries have been airdropping aid for months now. And the US is building a floating aid pier off of Gaza's Mediterranean coast that will allow ships to deliver aid directly at a cost of more than $300 million. But the United Nations World Food Programme says that getting food to people who need it is complex, especially given ongoing airstrikes and shelling.
We don't have enough trucks, so under the current circumstances where we don't have safety, where we don't have enough trucks coming into Gaza to deliver, where we have one checkpoint for now going into the north with only a few trucks going in, we're not operating at the scale that we would like.
The efforts that are already underway would be severely disrupted if Israel does mount a full-scale ground offensive on Rafah, making deliveries even more dangerous for aid workers and Gazans alike.
And I'm joined now by Sam Rose from UNRWA. That's the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. Welcome to DW. Thanks for your time. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, is saying the planned offensive on Rafah will happen no matter what. Can I ask for your reaction to that statement?
Yes, thanks for having me on. I mean, we're hearing the news live as you are, this breaking news, and obviously it's extremely concerning for us, for the humanitarian community, but most importantly for the people of Gaza and the people of Rafah in particular. There has been a palpable sense of anxiety here over the past few days, as this deadline has got closer and closer. And if indeed these reports are confirmed, we are extremely concerned about what the immediate and longer-term future holds for people here.
Sam, you're in Rafah. Can you give us a sense of what it is like there, the conditions? You spoke about the sense of anxiety. How are people coping with now the shadow of this planned offensive hanging over them?
The conditions are desperate. The conditions have been desperate here for several months. We have 1.5 million people living in a tiny slither of land here. Most of them have lost everything. Many of them are living in tents or in knitted together, tents made of bags of flour. They have almost nothing. We're living through extremely poor sanitation conditions, extremely poor health conditions. There are regular bombardments that pepper the day, that pepper the night, a constant sound of drone Israeli drones overhead that just torment people who have already been through so much. And on top of this, they're dealing with the most uncertain future. We already know the situation is catastrophic here. If the incursion and if the operation goes ahead, it will be far, far worse. We're looking at wide-scale destruction and really a multitude of casualties. That's on the ground here for people inside Rafah. Then we have major questions about where they will go, space for them to set up shelter, and how we as a humanitarian community will be able to assist and protect them.
On that point, Israel is saying that it's preparing to evacuate Palestinians from Rafah. Can you talk to us about the logistics of that? I mean, would it even be possible?
We've seen what's happened in northern Gaza. We saw what happened in Khan Yunis several weeks or several months ago now when it comes to northern Gaza. The situation here is completely different, both in terms of the scale, the order of magnitude. We're looking at almost 1.5 million people who are living here, and also the destination. They're being, if indeed this does come to pass, they'll be pushed into areas that have already been subject to savage bombardment over the past several months. And the other important factor is that aid has been getting into Gaza at far lower volumes than we would like. But Rafah, Kerem Shalom, the border area here, has been the lifeline for that trickle of aid. We know that it isn't enough. It's led to the worst deterioration in food security conditions anywhere we've seen in the world in the recent past, and what that means in terms of people going to an area where we cannot secure aid, we cannot provide for that. It doesn't bear thinking about what the consequences of something like that will be. And it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to see how it can be done safely without major casualties, without major loss of life.
Sam, the US is putting pressure on Israel to increase aid to Gaza. But again, what happens to aid deliveries if there is this offensive we're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, as we know, Rafah, Kerem Shalom has been the main entry point for aid. New and complementary terminals and entry points are being set up, but they are yet to be open. This is in Erez at the north, and the pier and the jetty off the sea. They are yet to be fully functioning. We have yet to see to receive details of how they will function in terms of how the aid will get from the ships safely into the hands of the organizations that need to distribute it around Gaza. And we're also not seeing the quantities and the volume of aid that are needed to meet the needs of all the people who will be fleeing, who will be on the run if this indeed happens. And let's not forget, it's not just about trucks of aid coming in, it's about fuel, it's about water, it's about electricity, it's about the basics of life that go beyond what you can put on a truck.
Sam Rose from UNRWA in Rafah. Sam, thank you so much for your time. And for more, we can go straight to Cairo now to speak to journalist Karim El-Gawhary. Karim, is there a realistic chance of a deal soon?
Well, there was an optimistic atmosphere yesterday with Hamas officials saying there's no major issues in the way. Also, the Egyptian negotiators saying that there are important Israeli concessions. Now the Hamas delegation left Cairo in order to negotiate this new Israeli proposal among themselves. An Israeli delegation that was originally planned to come to Cairo today deferred this visit until there is a written answer from Hamas. When it comes to substance, through the media, we don't have anything official. It seems like the Israeli proposal agrees that if Hamas releases 33 hostages, there will be a release of hundreds of Palestinians in Palestinian prisons and 40-day truce. But they talk about several phases, and here is when the sticking point comes. In the second phase, Hamas wants to have guarantees for a permanent ceasefire and that the Israeli army withdraws from the Gaza Strip. Now, it seems like in the Israeli proposal, there's the talk about sustained calm, whatever this means. But the problem is that the demands of Hamas of a permanent ceasefire and of the withdrawal of the Israeli army from the Gaza Strip, of course, this all directly contradicts with the Israeli war objective of destroying Hamas, and that is the reason why this all is so difficult.
You've made very clear there how many details, how many nuances are involved in these negotiations, yet diplomats are being fairly open about their optimism. Where is this sudden momentum coming from?
I think it's pressure on all sides. Pressure on Hamas, of course. They want to avoid, under any circumstances, an Israeli military offensive to Rafah. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is under pressure also from his ally, the US, to agree to some kind of ceasefire, not at least because US President Joe Biden himself is under pressure by the protests in the universities in the US. And all this leads to that there is some movement here in these negotiations.
OK. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now in Jordan. He's expected to visit Israel next. Will he be able to push for more aid for Gaza?
Well, he says there is more aid coming in the last days, but he says it's by far not enough. And he says something like we need to improve the deconflicting for humanitarian workers. I love American semantics. So I think to translate it, he says, basically, we need to make sure that the Israeli army doesn't kill humanitarian workers who hand out the aid and who make sure that the aid gets to to all the people I talked to, a member of an NGO here in Cairo, international NGO, who is working on the issue to get aid in. She's saying that to get the aid in, that improved in the last week. But the problem is that lots of this aid doesn't reach the northern Gaza Strip. Accessibility is still a big problem. And she's saying the only thing that will solve this problem at the end is going to be a ceasefire. That will be the ultimate relief for the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip.
Karim, thank you so much. That's Karim El-Gawhary in Cairo.